We are preparing to do honey harvest, which is done once a year. Some people might do it twice a year. It depends on your location and just how well the bees are doing that year. I generally like to do mine in late July, early August, before the goldenrod comes out. And then that way when the goldenrod does come out, I let them keep all of the honey from that for their winter stores. Right now we're just cleaning out the greenhouse. I'll spare you all the details of that. But so far I've moved a lot of things out of the way and hosed everything down. There's still a lot of cleaning that needs to be done. On top of the greenhouse we have put a shade cloth. Normally it's on before now, but since I was away on a job I never actually put it up until just this morning. That helps cut down the temperature inside the greenhouse some because it can get too hot in there. I do have 4 vents in the top of my greenhouse that I can use to help regulate the temperature inside as well. One of the reasons that I do the honey harvest in the greenhouse is because the temperature needs to be around 90 degrees in order for the honey to flow very good. That pretty much eliminates the house because my family likes to keep it at like 74, which is cold for me, but they kind of outnumber me, so I'll let them have that. And another reason, you don't want to just do it outside because as soon as you cut that first frame open and those bees start smelling that honey, you need protection. So if you want to do it outside, at least get a netted tent that there are no holes in, because all it takes is one honeybee to find the entrance and she goes and tells all of her hive, and they all like to come out and help you harvest the honey. Another reason it's kind of nice to do it in the greenhouse is because the aftermath when you're cleaning up, instead of hosing down all the honey off of your equipment and just letting it run down the drain, I open up the greenhouse doors and let the honeybees find it, and they will clean up every drop of honey that is in there and take it back to their hive. So even what you spill on the floor is not wasted because that's their food this winter. Here's a close-up of what the shade cloth looks like on the greenhouse. So far we have the vents closed, but we do have the option of opening them underneath of this so that we can get a breeze, but it's still sealed off from the honeybees finding their way in. We've also clamped it along the edge just to help prevent them from coming up through there. What I found while I was cleaning up the greenhouse. I now have my water hose and my power line ran in through the vent. And the reason I do this is so that we can have access to it, yet have the front doors to the greenhouse closed while we're doing the harvest. Once we cut open that first frame, we do not open these doors again until we are completely done. I brought in plenty so that I have a lot of leeway. And then it goes across to this table. Now what oops, tripped over the cord. What I'm going to do with all my equipment is scrub it down with hot soapy water. Even though I clean everything before I store it, I always clean it again before I use it because you never know what has been on it through the past year. So I like to be sure everything is very clean. Buckets, you always want to have more buckets than you think you're going to need. It is so much easier to put away a clean bucket if it's not needed than to go in search of an empty bucket, wash it, dry it, and then bring it back while you're in the middle of honey harvest. Now that everything has been scrubbed down really good, including the extractor, which is right there, all of this has to dry. It has to be fully, completely dry. Any moisture that gets into your honey can change the moisture content of the honey, and if it gets too high, will make it go rancid. So it's very important that all of your equipment is completely dry before you use it. Now while all this stuff is drying, I have suited up and I'm getting ready to start pulling honey frames. Because of the time of day it is, and I'm not sure if I'll get them done today or tomorrow, I'm going to stack them right here. What I've done is put a double screen on some cinder blocks, and a double screen, just like its name, has two screens, one on this side and one on the other side. And the latches that are on it right here, it's for combining hives basically, but you just leave those closed, and I'll set the honey supers on top of this, and it'll keep anything from getting into the honey in case I can't do it until tomorrow. I have to be sure, like I said earlier, that all the stuff is dry. So if it's not dry, I can't do it today anyways. But I can at least start pulling the honey. After I pull all the honey frames out of a hive, I then brush them off with a bee brush, walk through half of my yard, hand them off to somebody else who then takes them into the greenhouse. The reason I do this is to keep the honeybees, hopefully, from finding the greenhouse too quickly. So as I walk away from their hive, there's fewer and fewer that follow me. And by the time we get the frame into the greenhouse, there generally isn't any following us by then, so we can have no honeybees in the greenhouse. The rule of thumb for pulling honey frames in Virginia is 70% capped. Other parts of the country could be different amounts, but here in Virginia it's 70%. What that means is that the bees have decided that the moisture content of the honey has dropped low enough that it can be stored without going bad, and then they will put a cap on it to seal it for future use. It's kind of like us canning. So if they have not capped it, that means the moisture content of that honey, or that nectar that is in that hole there, is it's too high of a moisture content. If you get too high of a moisture content in your honey harvest, then the honey can go rancid. It's like not properly canning your foods. So if one side is a little under 70% and the other side is 100% capped, then I will sometimes go ahead and pull it because the ratio is still about 70% or higher for both sides. But if one side is 100% capped and the other side is not capped at all, I will not pull that frame. I will let them keep it because I don't want to make that moisture ratio get off. Half of this one is 100% capped and the other half is not capped at all. We may have to do a second honey harvest if we're doing it too early. So I pulled all the frames, put them in the greenhouse. I have a fan down here that's just blowing some air because it's pretty warm in here, but not on any of the honey. Scraping knife, scraping tool. There's my hot knife in the back. It's been plugged in. Some water for rinsing hands, towel, bowl scraper, the buckets, and then the extractor. The temperature right now is 109 degrees in here. A hot knife is very hot, so watch your fingers not only with the knife, but also with any drips coming off the knife. You really don't want melting wax and hot honey dropping on your fingers. It's melting the wax as you go along, so work slowly so that you're not pushing the wax instead of melting and cutting it away. With a hot knife, you can go either from the top to the bottom or the bottom to the top. So it's however you're most comfortable doing it. When the bees draw out the comb far enough, then the hot knife will actually take all the caps off. But many times it might be not drawn out far enough, and you'll need to use a capping tool. It's just a little scraper, and you just scrape the caps open so that the honey can spin out. This extractor holds 9 frames, 9 medium frames and 3 deeps. I don't have any deeps, so I'm only showing the mediums. When loading the extractor, you want it to be balanced as much as possible. So kind of feel the weight of each frame as it's being put in, and to try to balance it as best as possible. Put heavies opposite of each other and then fill in the gaps with the lighter frames. Because the extractor is not going to be completely balanced, I always make the first spin very slow and steady. This helps equalize it a little bit better. After I feel that the spins are getting a little more smooth, then you can spin it more vigorously. When I feel like most of the honey is spun out, I'll check a couple of the frames just to see how much honey is still left in there. I like to get out every bit of honey that I possibly can. In the past, I've just let the honeybees rob these out once they've been spun, but I found that there's so much fighting that now what I'm going to do is place them into empty supers. I'm going to divide them up between my hives and place them in empty supers, and then place that on top of each hive. That will allow each hive to be able to rob out their own frames and really cuts down on fighting. This one right here is one that was spun. But you can see there's still some honey in it. There's air bubbles. and some honey on the frames, and they will take every drop of honey and use it. Then I also have 2 that I'm going to scrape. It's called just crushing it, because I only had 2 left over, and that's not enough to do another spin. And then I had 2 that had some cut comb. The cut comb is all they had was a starter, and they built all this comb down. So I'm going to just cut this out and put it in a jar as cut comb. We're now getting ready to drain all of this into a bucket. Okay. Now at this point, this honey is not filtered or strained at all. So you'll see chunks coming out, that is chunks of wax, of the beeswax and the propolis. Once we take it into the house, then I will strain it in there. Once it slows down, I will take that bowl scraper that I showed earlier and start scraping the inside of the extractor to be sure to get as much honey out as possible. Okay. Okay, like I said, I had 2 extra frames left over that I'm just going to crush and strain. You can also do this if you don't have an extractor. It's very easy to do. Just get your blade or spatula and just scrape down. You see all these little orange dots? That's pollen. It also makes it a little harder to scrape through there. And then you don't have to do this. I just take this and scrape it, because that does get more off. And then if you see the metal holes down in this bucket, all of the honey that's in this wax will strain down through these holes into the holding tank below it, and the wax will be sitting on top. Okay, this is all the cappings that came off, and I've just been kind of occasionally moving them around so that the honey can drip off and drip through the screen. So now that it's gotten to this point, there's still a lot of honey in here, but most of it's come off. So I'm going to take this out and put it in a bowl for cleaning later. I do save all this wax. After I get all the wax out, then I use this to scrape down as much of the honey off of this as I possibly can. This is a very sticky job. I'm going to put this outside to let the bees rub it off. As you can see, there's a lot of wax floating, but we're going to strain that in a little bit. Using the scraper to scrape all of it out of the capping tank. This is a standard filter. This top one has larger holes, and then it drains into this one that has finer holes in it. The problem I find with this is that most of the people that buy honey from me do it because of seasonal allergies, and in order for it to work for seasonal allergies, you need the pollen. So I like to only do this, which allows more of the pollen to go through, and I don't use this one. So what I have done is created a little makeshift holder on this bucket, and these are just the legs from a jelly holder for making jelly that I've put on here. I've twist tied it together, and then I've taped them onto the side to keep them from moving, and that way I can set this on there and get a lighter strain instead of a very fine strain. The bucket I'm going to be straining into is my honey bucket. It has a honey gate on the bottom, so that once I filter it and put the lid on here, I'll leave it in here for at least a few days to let any bubbles come to the top, and then I can pour off from the bottom of the bucket into any type of container that I want to bottle it into. the fun part because sometimes this likes to slide. So you can see all that wax floating on the top. This wax I'll let drain off for a little while, and then I'll add it to the other wax that I put in the bowl earlier. Later I will clean the wax and use it for different herbal preparations. After all the bees rob out the frames, I'll take them off of each hive and then I'll put them in the Ziploc bag and freeze them like I do on one of my maintenance videos that I have already made. So please check that one out to see how I do that. It is very important to take proper care of your frames. If they are not taken proper care of, then you can check out the video that I made on the damage that wax moths can do. It can be devastating and can destroy a hive. So it's very important that when the frames are stored, that they are stored properly and handled properly. In general, I don't use smoke on my hives unless it's a very aggressive hive and I just don't have any other choice. Using smoke on a hive does mask pheromones that the bees put off. So if you accidentally smash one, or if one of them says it's time to attack, then it masks those pheromones. So a lot of beekeepers do use smoke. But during honey harvest in particular, what is also happening is when they smell that smoke, it triggers them to, oh no, there's a fire nearby, we may have to move. So they start packing, and the way that they start packing is they start eating the honey. They start filling up on the honey so that in case they have to leave the hive, then they have food for their travel time. I don't really like using the smoke when I'm doing the honey harvest because it kind of interferes with that. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you like these videos. Thank you.